In a significant development, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has appointed Nawaf Salem, the head of the International Court of Justice, as the new Prime Minister. Salem inherits a nation in turmoil that is grappling with one of the worst economic crises in modern history. With Lebanon's financial collapse, soaring debt and political divisions, the new government must tackle urgent reforms, restore trust and secure international cooperation to navigate these complex challenges. Now we move to a live broadcast for a speech from the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the Atlantic Council.
Fallen far short of meeting the colossal scale of need in Gaza. We've been clear publicly and privately that there are steps Israel could take to transform the humanitarian situation in Gaza and ensure that critical aid reaches all Palestinians in need. Those include restarting the flow of commercial goods, undertaking pauses in military operations, as it did during the successful polio vaccination campaign, and securing specific corridors for the flow of aid to storage and distribution sites. The suffering of civilians in Gaza is a tragedy in its own right. It's also isolated Israel internationally and imperiled its hard-earned strides toward building relationships in the region. The longer the humanitarian crisis in Gaza goes on, the more Arab countries that recently normalized relations with Israel will face pressure from their populations to walk away. And the greater the risk that Israel's long-standing peace accords with Jordan and Egypt will collapse. The ballast that these partnerships provide for Israel in the region, easy to take for granted, especially for generations who only know a world where these nations are at peace. But their rupture would unleash even greater instability and be incredibly hard to repair. Remaining bogged down in Gaza will harm Israel economically. Already, foreign direct investment and Israel's credit rating have taken real hits. The extended mobilization of reservists is undermining tens of thousands of businesses and private sector productivity. For its part, the Palestinian Authority repeatedly failed to undertake long overdue reforms, like reining in corruption and a bloated bureaucracy, further eroding its support among Palestinians. The PA's refusal to consistently and unequivocally condemn Hamas in the killings of October 7th only entrenched doubts among Israelis that the two communities can ever live side by side in peace, as have the PA's payments to the families of terrorists and the anti-Semitic remarks of its leader. Many partners in the region and beyond have also been unwilling to publicly condemn Hamas. Amidst the chorus of condemnation of Israel, the silence about Hamas has been deafening. Where was the sustained and united demand for Hamas to release hostages, to put down its arms? Where was the urgent effort to crack down on the financing, the arms, the materials that Hamas employs to deadly effect? Where was the opprobrium for Hamas's heinous practice of hiding among civilians? Had countries around the world applied this collective pressure, Hamas's leaders might have been forced to make different decisions many months ago, and massive suffering might have been averted. Hamas especially has often chosen to sit back and wait, believing that the more time passed, the more Palestinians in Gaza suffered, the greater the chances that Iran, Hezbollah, and others would feel forced to attack Israel, sparking a wider war, the more international pressure would mount on Israel to unconditionally end its military operation, the greater the likelihood a rift would open between Israel and the United States. For its part, Israel has pursued its military campaign past the point of destroying Hamas's military capacity and killing the leaders responsible for October 7th, convinced that unrelenting military pressure was required to get Hamas to accept a ceasefire and hostage deal on Israel's terms. And Israel has held firm to the belief that any deviation from its intensive military effort would be interpreted by Hamas as a sign of weakness or declining will. Some have questioned whether a different policy and approach would have changed this dynamic, whether we put too much pressure on Israel, on Hamas, on Iran, or not enough. We have debated these questions vigorously within the administration, within the State Department, where we benefited from a range of different views. Some believe, by privately and publicly seeking to restrain and reshape Israel's military operations, we held it back from inflicting even greater damage on Iran, on Hamas, on Hezbollah, on other adversaries. Others believe we enabled the Israeli government to pursue a military campaign that was disproportionate, self-defeating, and counter to U.S. interests. It is crucial to ask questions like these, which will be studied for years to come. I wish I could stand here today and tell you with certainty that we got every decision right. I cannot. I wish I could tell you that leaders in the region always put their people's interests ahead of their own interests. They did not. But what I can tell you is this. First, we continue to believe the best way to create a more stable, secure, and prosperous Middle East and deal a lasting blow to Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the entire so-called axis of resistance is through forging a more integrated region. And the key to achieving that integration, now more than ever, is ending this conflict in a way that realizes the long-standing aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians to live with peace and security in states of their own. Second, as much influence as the United States wields in the Middle East, we can't dictate outcomes. In the end, whether the region takes the path toward greater integration will ultimately come down not to us, but to the decisions of its leaders and the decisions of its people. We stand here today with a window of opportunity still open. While seizing it cannot bring back the innocent Israeli and Palestinian lives lost, it will prevent more lives from being taken. It will break the cycle of violence and bloodshed. We must not squander this chance. Israel's most deep-rooted desire from its founding has been to be accepted and treated as a normal state in the region and the world, with all the rights and responsibilities that implies. At the same time, in Israeli hearts and minds lies the conviction that past efforts at peace have been met with rejection, violent resistance, greater insecurity, with Camp David leading to the Second Intifada, the unilateral withdrawals from Lebanon and Gaza, leading to Hezbollah and to Hamas. In the wake of October 7th, convincing Israelis otherwise will be a necessary and major undertaking. The prospect of normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia represents the best opportunity to achieve the long-sought goal of Israel's greater integration in the region. And it's also the best incentive to get the parties to make tough decisions necessary to fully realize the aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians and cut the Gordian knot that has held back progress up to this point. Much of the heavy lifting for normalization is complete, including negotiations on complex U.S.-Saudi elements of an agreement. These elements include a strategic alliance agreement that establishes Saudi Arabia as a treaty ally of the United States, a defense cooperation agreement that enhances military coordination and builds integrated capabilities, an energy agreement that includes civil nuclear cooperation, and an economic agreement to bolster bilateral trade and investment. For both sides, October 7th has raised the stakes of the normalization deal. For Saudi Arabia, advancing efforts to realize Palestinian self-determination was always a key component. But now, the need to end the war in Gaza and for a credible road to Palestinian statehood is all the more urgent for Riyadh. For Israel, October 7th and its aftermath have underscored that a more integrated region and security architecture can best address threats to its security and isolate its enemies. That is exactly what we saw in April and again in October when, with U.S. leadership, partners in the region and beyond came together in an unprecedented way to help defend Israel against Iran's unprecedented direct missile attacks. It also speaks to what the world could do to put Iran's nuclear program back in a box and ensure that Tehran never has a nuclear weapon. In 2021, a team of documentary filmmakers traveled around Gaza asking children a simple question: what is your dream? Many of the kids they interviewed looked to be 5 or 6 years old, about the same age as my own kids. A little girl dreamed of becoming a doctor. Why? The interviewer asked. To treat people in war, she said. A boy dreamed of becoming a pilot so that he
That was a live broadcast of a speech from the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the Atlantic Council, where he spoke about Gaza and the steps that President Biden is currently taking regarding the Middle East. And now, back to Think Tank. Judge Nawaf Salem has been asked and tasked with forming Lebanon's new government under President Joseph Aoun's first term. Salem, a distinguished international jurist and former Lebanese ambassador to the UN, was first proposed as a neutral candidate by the opposition in 2019, but faced resistance from Hezbollah and its ally, Amal. Al-Sharq al-Awsat reports that he has long advocated for financial and political reforms, emphasizing the need to combat sectarianism, clientelism, and favoritism, while ensuring social justice and an independent judiciary. Salem's commitment to Lebanon's sovereignty and regional role is clear. His appointment has raised concerns in Israel, given his outspoken support for Palestinian rights and criticism of Israeli policies, marking him as a controversial yet influential figure in Lebanon's political landscape. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salem has pledged to rebuild destroyed villages and prioritize economic recovery. In his first press conference from Babda Palace, he rejected exclusionary policies, advocating unity and national partnership. Salem emphasized extending state authority across Lebanon and fulfilling UN Resolution 1701. He committed to justice for the 2020 Beirut port explosion victims and envisioned a unified Lebanon for all citizens, calling for cooperation to strengthen national institutions.
As Lebanon enters a new yet perilous era of politics, President Joseph Aoun has tasked Nawaf Salem, the head of the International Court of Justice (ICJ), to form a new government. This decision follows a parliamentary consultations where Salem garnered 84 MPs to be chosen as prime minister. Lebanon's crises are intertwined, with political fragmentation, sectarian tensions, and an unprecedented economic collapse collectively taking their toll since 2019. The Lebanese pound has plummeted by over 98% in value against the dollar, plunging the nation into one of the worst financial crises globally, as identified by the World Bank. The core challenge facing the new government is addressing the ongoing collapse, which has eroded public trust and left the population in dire poverty. The new prime minister must confront the daunting task of restructuring Lebanon's banking sector. A significant hurdle in this process is restoring confidence in financial institutions, which requires substantial reform and international cooperation. Lebanon's sovereign debt exceeding $90 billion exacerbates the problem, necessitating urgent negotiations with the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and other global financial bodies. Moreover, the Lebanese political system remains fragmented, with significant opposition from Hezbollah and its allies. The Prime Minister must navigate these internal divisions while seeking external support to secure Lebanon's future. The new government's success hinges on its ability to stabilize the economy, implement meaningful reforms, and engage with international institutions to restore Lebanon's financial health. Salem's appointment signals a potential shift, but the road ahead is fraught with challenges, requiring bold and strategic leadership.
And providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the new Lebanese government, we're joined from Beirut by Mr. Abdullah Ni'ma, the strategic political analyst, and from Cairo by Mr. Ahmed Said Ahmed, an international relations expert. Gentlemen, welcome to Think Tank. Mr. Ni'ma, I'll start off with you first. Now, how will Nawaf Salem navigate Lebanon's ongoing economic collapse and restore the country's fiscal stability?
Good evening for you and dear viewers, for the Qnews viewers. Of course, the Prime Minister Nawaf Salam comes in a very critical time for Lebanon, and I think his presence as the Prime Minister for Lebanon for the new republic and electing President Aoun in a period where Lebanon receives the international and Arab support that is unprecedented, as Lebanon has went through a lot since 1943. And I think in the light of the support on the international and regional level for Lebanon, Nawaf Salam will be open to all Lebanese factions, even in spite of some tensions at the beginning with the formation of the government. I think he has a program or an agenda to follow, and he announced this agenda, and it requires the cooperation to build and reconstruct all the destroyed villages due to the Israeli strikes on Lebanon. He promised the people and the loved ones of the casualties to help them and restore their rights. He talked about the fiscal situation in Lebanon. He has a workshop to reconstruct the Lebanese state and to rebuild the international confidence in the Lebanese system. He comes from a very strong background. He has a very deep roots in Lebanon, and he is very eligible to assume his office. President Aoun expressed that he does not want to appoint ministers. He delegated this responsibility to Nawaf Salam. Previously, we witnessed the tensions and conflict regarding minister's appointment process. I think this is a healthy stage that we're witnessing now in Lebanon, and I am very optimistic, and I would like to extend gratitude to the international community, on top of which the United States of America, that is giving a lot of interest to the Lebanese situation, and I think that Nawaf Salam will have a great start in a new reign with President Aoun.
Well, Mr. Sayed, we just heard Mr. Nama speaking about the Lebanese economy. Now, what role do you think the international institutions like the IMF play in supporting Lebanon's financial recovery under Salam's leadership?
In fact, Nawaf Salam is assuming office as Prime Minister, which gives hope and support to gain international support for Lebanon, as he is an international figure that is respected internationally, as he was at the head of the ICJ. And I think this will encourage international institutions such as the IMF and the other financial institutions to support Lebanon and provide loans to Lebanon. And in my opinion, Lebanon requires an international conference to mobilize support for reconstruction, especially in southern Lebanon, given the great deal of destruction that took place due to the Israeli strikes on the southern villages and the border regions, which requires a lot of funds that will not be only provided by the IMF. We require the support of all international financial institutions. We require around $10 billion for reconstruction. Regarding the IMF, it is controlled by certain rules for giving loans and fundings, which is related to an economic reform program for Lebanon to be qualified and eligible for the support from the International Monetary Fund. We must also have some transparency and anti-corruption efforts, which was indicated by Nawaf Salam. We also face the hinder of the US sanctions on Lebanon and on Hezbollah, which is an obstacle hindering the financial support. These sanctions must be eased because the Lebanese economy is suffering from a lot of crises since in 2019, with the deterioration of the Lebanese currency and the deterioration, the inflation and the deposits crises.
Yes. Well, Mr. Nama, now you spoke of the Lebanese political spectrum, now with the sectarian tensions deeply embedded. How can Salem unify Lebanon's fragmented political system to implement all the necessary reforms, such as the ones you mentioned?
In my opinion, I would like to comment. Excuse me. Excuse me. Lebanon received promises from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from different Arab countries for the reconstruction effort and to apply economic reforms in the Lebanese state. And I agree to hold a conference to mobilize support for Lebanon. We have now $1 billion as support for Lebanon. The last were mobilized in the last conference held in France to support the Lebanese army. We received $3 billion in France to support Lebanon and to support the Lebanese army. Lebanon was promised of a lot of pledges. We need harmony between the Prime Minister and the President. We need a harmonized team, a government to actually work for the interest of the country, not a government of tensions and sectorial disagreements and sectarian disagreements. We need this reign to be the reign of efforts and work to the best interest of Lebanon. It's not only about, it's now in the hands of the Prime Minister and the President, not Iran, as it was the situation with the previous regime.
Let me interrupt you now, Mr. Said. Now, concerning Salem's outspoken stance on the Palestinian rights that has raised concerns internationally, looking at the Lebanese foreign relations file, how could this impact Lebanon's foreign relations, particularly with Israel, given the ceasefire that is taking place right now?
In my opinion, Lebanon now, after the ceasefire and after electing a new president, President Joseph Aoun, and appointing a new prime minister, Lebanon now is more capable of dealing with the international relations and being open to all states, especially in the Arab world and also in the European Union. Before, Lebanon depended only on Iran, which as Iran dominated all the Lebanese interactions represented in Hezbollah. Now the Iranian presence in Lebanon is very limited, and we are able to build more balanced relationships with Arab and European countries, as Nawaf Salam also has a lot of international support.
Yes. Well, hopefully we do witness a lot of progress in the Lebanese international relationships, and hopefully a positive outcome and a peaceful outcome would take place in Lebanon. That was Mr. Abdullah Nama, the strategic political analyst, and Mr. Ahmed Said Ahmed, the international relations expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your insights here on Think Tank. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Think Tank today. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.